We will be using a console application to explain delegates and events in C#. A delegate is a function pointer that holds a reference to a method. It has a method signature that has a return type and accepts parameters. It does not provide an implementation. The math operation delegate has a method signature that returns an integer and takes two parameters that are integers. We add a method to the math operation delegate called add. The method satisfies the requirement for the delegate since it takes two integers as parameters and returns an integer. We invoke the add delegate with two arguments 1 and 2 and store the return value in an integer named sum. Then we write the value of sum in the console window. Here is the value of the sum. We can simplify the lambda expression as shown here. A delegate allows a method to take another method as a parameter. The calculator class has two properties of type integer, a and b, and a constructor. The evaluate method returns an integer and takes a method as a parameter that satisfies the math operation delegate. It effectively applies the math operation method from the parameter on the two properties. We create an object named calculator from the calculator class and pass in two arguments 5 and 10 into the constructor to set the properties. We call the evaluate method on the calculator object and pass in a method that satisfies the delegate. The method takes two integer parameters and multiplies them. The method will effectively multiply the two properties of the calculator object and save the value in the product variable. We write the value of the product in the console window. Here is the value for the product. An action is a built-in delegate in C# that represents a method that has no parameters and has no return value. It returns void. The greeter class has a greet method that takes a method as a parameter that satisfies the built-in action delegate. It then runs the delegate method and returns a void. We create a greeter object from the greeter class and call the greet method. We pass in a method using the lambda expression that takes no parameters and returns a void to meet the requirements of the action delegate. The delegate method writes a line of text in the console window. Here is the line of text. The action delegate of generic type T returns a void and can take one or more parameters. The greeter class has a property called name of type string and a constructor. The method greet returns a void and takes a method as a parameter that meets the requirements of the action delegate of generic type T. The delegate method takes a single parameter of type string and returns a void. The greet method then runs the delegate method using the value of the name property as an argument for the delegate method's parameter. We create an object called greeter and pass in the name John to the constructor to set the name property. We then call the greet method on the greeter object. The greet method takes a delegate method as a parameter. The delegate method takes a single parameter and writes it to the console window. As you may recall, the delegate method uses the value of the name property as the argument for the parameter when it runs the delegate method. This means that the value of the name property that we set in the constructor John will be passed in as an argument to the parameter in the delegate method, and then will be written in the console window. John is written in the console window. A func is a built-in generic delegate that represents a method that returns a value. It can take none, one, or more parameters. The calculator class has two properties x and y of type integer. It has a constructor to set the values of the properties. The evaluate method takes a func delegate method as a parameter. The delegate method takes two parameters of type integer and returns a value of type integer. The delegate method takes the values of the x and y properties as arguments for its parameters when it runs the delegate method. We create a calculator object and pass in values of 10 and 5 in the constructor to set the x and y properties of the object. We call the evaluate method on the object and pass in a delegate method as a parameter. The delegate method takes two parameters of type integer and adds them together to return a value of type integer. As you may recall, the delegate method uses the values of the x and y properties of the object as the arguments for the parameters when it runs the delegate method. This means that the values of the x and y properties that we set in the constructor 10 and 5 will be passed in as arguments to the parameters in the delegate method, and then it will be added together. The return value of type integer is stored in the sum variable. Finally, we write the value of the sum in the console window. The value for the sum is shown here. A predicate is a specialized delegate that represents a method that takes exactly one input parameter and returns a Boolean value. The password validator class has a password property of type string. It has a constructor that sets the value of the property. The validate method takes a delegate method as a parameter. The delegate method takes a single parameter of type string and returns a bool to satisfy the predicate delegate. The delegate method takes the value of the password property as an argument when it runs the delegate method. We create a validator object and pass in a value in the constructor to set the password property. We call the validate method on the object. The validate method takes a delegate method as a parameter. The delegate method takes a single parameter and runs a method that returns a bool. The delegate method checks if the value of the input parameter is more than 6 characters long. The delegate method uses the value of the password property of the object as the argument for the parameter when it runs the delegate method. The value of the password property that we set in the constructor will be passed in as an argument to the parameter in the delegate method, and then it will be checked for character length. The result of the method will be of type bool and saved in the isValid variable. Finally, the isValid variable is written in the console window. The Lambda expression can be simplified as shown here. Run the application. The value of the isValid variable is displayed. The notify delegate provides a signature for a method that takes no parameters and returns a void. The message class contains 3 methods: email, SMS, and phone. Each method satisfies the notify delegate since they take no parameters and return a void. We create a message object from the message class. We add the email method on the message object to the notify delegate. We also add the SMS method and phone method to the delegate. A multicast delegate holds references to more than one method. When you invoke a multicast delegate, all the methods in its invocation list are called sequentially in the order they were added. We then invoke the multicast delegate. We check to ensure the delegate has methods before we invoke it. Notice how the methods run in the sequence that they were added. We remove the SMS method from the multicast delegate. Notice how the SMS method was removed. The event handler is a predefined delegate that serves as a blueprint for methods meant to respond to events. The event handler takes a parameter representing the object that publishes the event and an event args that is used to transmit data associated with the event. The event handler can transmit no data or data of a specific defined type. The oven class contains a event handler delegate named overheated. The delegate transmits data of type integer for the event. The event keyword ensures that external code can only subscribe or unsubscribe, but cannot interfere with the event itself. The oven class has a method named setTemperature that takes an integer for the temperature parameter. If the temperature is set above 450, the overheated delegate is invoked and any methods added to the multicast delegate will run in sequence. The delegate will send the object that publishes the event by using the this keyword and will also send an integer representing the temperature. The smoke alarm class contains a method named onOvenOverheated. The method satisfies the event handler delegate since it returns a void and takes the parameters sender of type object and e of type integer representing the temperature. When the onOvenOverheated method runs, it will write a warning message in the console window with the temperature it received as data from the event publisher. We create an oven object and a smoke alarm object. The smoke alarm object subscribes to the event published by the oven object. We see here that the onOvenOverheated method is added to the overheated multicast delegate and included in its invocation list. We use the setTemperature method on the oven object to set the temperature to over 450 to trigger the event. Let's step through the code. In the oven object, the setTemperature method sets the temperature to 600. The temperature is above 450, so the overheated delegate is invoked. The onOvenOverheated method in the smoke alarm object will be invoked since it is a subscriber in the invocation list. The method will then run and write a warning in the console window. The warning message is displayed in the console window.